Generally, you said feminism is neutral.
Here's what actually happened.
The foundation of all knowledge.
I'm really mad that
what difference does it make, right? What
Stop.
the deregulation of the industry is obviously going to cause more of that industry.
And to lubricate the trust connection between people until they have enough.
Yet we could still look at biological reality in determining who's a female, even if there are.
Why don't you denounce feminism the same way you're denouncing capitalism? If you don't...
For something to be objective, it needs to be verifiable. And you can't verify...
If I make a claim as a political pundit, it is true that I definitely could be wrong.
Yeah,
you're promoting, right?
Ideology is the main tenet of politics, right? This is my ideology.
But so 2015. Anyone go back and watch the footage? The first GOP debate.
Cool, Robert. Oh, dead? With a crowbar, you say?
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I am Sarah, the Raging Tomato, bringing to you live another Moderator Monday. Welcome back to Mater Nation. This evening, I have Horseradish. I've got Average Debate Enjoyer, who is sharing the wrong screen. He's all flipped around. Look, I can't fix it. Okay. Logix and Rinald, of course, here to debate the topic are Donald Trump's rapid executive actions an effective solution to congressional inaction. Horseradish and Tyler have the affirmative yes. Horseradish, if you'd like to begin with your opening statement, please.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for having us, and thank you to my opponents for meeting us out here in a good faith forum. So I want to start out by repeating what you said. Are Donald Trump's rapid executive actions an effective solution to congressional inaction? I think that the answer here is irrefutably yes. I think that we wouldn't be having this conversation right now if they were not effective. I feel that I'm anticipating that our opponents are going to get into whether each and every executive order was correct or good or positive, but this isn't about whether or not we support Donald Trump. I want to be perfectly clear up front. I did not vote for Donald Trump ever, never will. I cannot wait for him to be, and him and his entire administration to be out of office. And the fact of the matter is, his usage of these executive orders has set a precedent so that when my next administration comes in, they're going to be able to use that same tactic to affect the same level of change that Donald Trump has done. I am looking forward to them being even more aggressive with their executive orders than FDR was during the Great Depression. I think that a executive order was founded. Every single president, except for the one who was only in office for like 31 days, has used executive orders. That Donald Trump hasn't even used more executive orders than other presidents, or he hasn't set a precedent. I think he was the set a precedent for the first 100 days in his second term, but his first term in office, he used fewer executive orders than the previous three presidents. He has done everything that he can to try to get things to go through legislation. But more importantly, right now, both of the checks and balances that are in place to prevent improper usage of executive orders are in favor of what he's doing. So with that said, both branches of the government, other than the executive, have the ability to get rid of any executive order if they deem it to be illegal. So It seems like it's a perfect method for a president to come in, make dramatic changes, affect how the executive branch and the different administrations and agencies beneath the executive branch are functioning, and implement the change that he has promised to his constituency on his campaign. And that'll be the rest of my time.
Thank you, Horseradish. Tyler, to you, please.
Are Donald Trump's executive orders an effective solution to congressional inaction? I don't know how this is anything besides a yes, to be completely honest with you. The only argument I can think of is that it takes 60 votes to add or remove a law, but if they get rid of the filibuster, that's out the window anyways, so it's just one step away from Congress being just as disposable, making just as disposable of laws as the president's executive orders. At the end of the day, that's the best argument I hear as to why it's easier to get rid of an executive order. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's up to the voters. And what this dichotomy does of a new president coming in, enacting his executive orders for legislation, is it speeds things up. It allows the voters to see this is what a country would look like under this branch of government, instead of taking 2 or 3 years for things to materialize. I don't only think it's effective, I think it politically, it's advantageous for both parties to actually display what they can do, not have to wait for 2 years of transition. Now, my argument stems from the 17th Amendment and the ability to vote for senators. When you democracy max to that level, you open the door for political actors to step in. What you do is you tell the senator, instead of being an expert at focusing on your job, you now have to spend 2/3 of your time campaigning. You have to spend your time begging for money. You turn them into somebody that is no longer a political expert appointed by a state. So they offshore a lot of their responsibility. They passed a ton of legislation to give the president powers over temporary wartime, tariffing, and all sorts of actions that he wasn't constitutionally allowed just from the Article 2. In doing that, you've expanded the power of the presidency to not have to go back to Congress for all sorts of things, and they can be extremely effective, if only sometimes for a limited amount of time. The best argument, again, is you can keep going back to this, that it's not written in stone. The next admin can come in and reverse it. But in reality, when the voters actually get to see the results, like let's say hypothetically what Trump's done on the border, all through executive action, some of it being tariff threats, but still the executive action was being able to use those tariffs. At the end of the day, he's challenging all sorts of constitutional norms. He's right now in the Supreme Court challenging the interpretation of the 14th Amendment. He's challenging Humphrey's executor, emoluments, all sorts of things. He's extremely effective, whether you like it or not.
Perfect. Thank you, Tyler. And Logix, to you, please.
Effective is defined as producing a desired or intended result, functioning properly, or being in effect. I think it's hard to deny that this word can be attributed to Trump's EOs. Typically, when we consider what EOs are used for, they're for swift responses to national emergencies and done with a clear goal to produce a quick outcome and not a substitute for congressional legislation. I would think that anyone in support of Trump's proposed policies would not defend most of the EOs he signed in his second term because they do nothing but give a temporary relief for a problem his supporters claim to care about. For example, if you want a safer border, legislation through Congress can ensure that going forward we have less illegal immigration and a comprehensive process to gain citizenship, TPS, or legal residency. If you want less federal overreach, you wouldn't want EOs shutting down or throttling different agencies like USAID, the Department of Education, and the CFPB, and consolidating all the power to the executive with no real checks and balances until the SCOTUS gets around to it. For example, these global tariffs, which are now attempting to be refunded, a problem that we never had to encounter in the first place. These are just a couple examples of how EOs are just a band-aid on what some perceive to be blood-spurting injuries. If we want policy to be long-lasting, effective, and legal, it doesn't behoove any of us to use EOs in place of Congress. If we wanted the executive to rule overall, there would be no need for a legislative branch. For government to work, all branches need to work cohesively without trying to overreach, and Trump has consistently attempted to be the executive, legislature, and sometimes the judiciary. And I'm hoping to hear from my opponents a clear, desired long-term consequence of EOs and why they are preferable to congressional legislation.
Perfect. Thank you, Logix. And Renyal, to you, please.
Yeah, I think this is a bold topic. It seems obvious to me that Trump is creating the inaction by Congress himself, by the extremely divisive rhetoric that he levies at his political opponents. and trying to use this as a justification to bypass congressional power through his invocations of executive power. But the problem is that an executive order is solely meant to order the executive. It does not hold the adequate power to replace congressional action. So the power of an EO does nothing to fill the void of congressional inaction unless Donald Trump signs an illegal executive order in order to extend presidential power over Congress, which is just going to get blocked by the courts anyway, which we've seen throughout the history of Donald Trump's first term and throughout his second term so far. In either of these cases, these are not solutions to congressional inaction. It seems like Donald Trump just has a history of creating an issue and then searching for solutions. However, the president doesn't hold the power to legislate. You can look at his executive order trying to put in the provisions of the SAVE Act, which is certainly not going to pass any court and is currently enjoined. Or you can look at his executive action on the border, which has also been enjoined in multiple courts and is widely recognized as illegal. The biggest advantage to congressional action is that it takes another act of Congress to remove it. The biggest downside to an executive order is the exact same. Supposing these actions do pass any legal threshold, and supposing they do anything beyond the standard, like ordering the executive, it's useless. That's just going to get revoked by the next administration anyway. So if the question is whether or not an executive order is an adequate solution to congressional inaction, one, I would say Donald Trump should probably be looking in different areas than executive orders. Maybe he should just tone down the rhetoric so Congress wants to work with him. And B, if he views the executive order as a solution to the legislators not legislating, it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what an executive order is supposed to be.
Perfect. Thank you, Rinwald. Oh my goodness. Rinwald. My apologies.
Too much Spin City.
I know. Oh my goodness. And ladies and gentlemen, all of these gentlemen are streaming live to their channels, I believe. If you'd like to go, give them a like, subscribe, share, viewership, and definitely send them all of your money. In the meantime, we're going to get through our debate. Then we will move into closing statements. Then we will read and respond to your kind super chats. And of course, your favorite part, we will open the panel for open panel Q&A and go into full gauntlet mode later on. Gentlemen, I leave the floor open to you.
So, can I ask a question real quick? Are you Rinwald? Logix, I'll come back to you if we get time in a second here, but I'm sure my partner will want to jump in. What happened at the border that was illegal?
So Donald Trump signed an executive order basically suspending access through the southern border for asylum seekers. So basically saying if you don't funnel through an official port of entry, then you're not allowed to seek asylum. And there's no reading of the statute that Congress passed allowing asylum seekers to seek asylum regardless of at a port of entry to say that Donald Trump has the authority to do that in any regard.
Okay, and then do you know what he did after that when it was repealed?
It's my impression that it was enjoined recently, but I mean, he's signed a couple executive orders similar to this, so it depends on which one.
Maybe not after that, but as an alternative. What he did as an alternative was he's changed the standard of asylum to be credible fear to reasonable fear, which is a much higher burden of proof that has to be proven by the asylee. So instead, he just changed the rules. So, do you know that legislation sometimes goes through, they attempt it, and then the Congress or the judiciary says that's unconstitutional, you can't do that, and they just try the legislation again or try something similar, right? So just the
same thing happens with executive orders, doesn't it, Tanner?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. A small percent of executive orders being declared unconstitutional and Trump pivoting to something else that does the similar effect doesn't actually show that they are ineffective, right?
So I would reject this idea that, changing the standard by which an asylum seeker needs to meet is effectively the same thing as disallowing asylum seeking outside of official ports of entry. That's something that Donald Trump wants. This is something that it seems like the Republicans want as well. I feel like.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were.
No, you're all good. I think the idea though is that if we're looking for any sort of meaningful change at the border, we need to do it through Congress. There's no way that we can avoid using Congress to do this, both for the reason of you're compromising on any measure of success, it seems, if you're doing it by executive order. And like you said in your opening statement, then executive order is just going to get struck down by the next presidency.
Yeah, I agree with you. Hold on, let me just finish the point, then I'll let you jump in here. So yeah, I agree with you that at some point, competent border or the government has to come together to put something in effect that's going to be longer term. But if the filibuster goes away, it's no longer long term. Where at the end of the day, Trump has turned a border that let in more people over 4 years than any 4-year point in American history to a border that is now currently for 5 months straight letting in 0 people that are undocumented. So I would argue that with the same amount of money, the same amount of tactics, they were able to shut this off just because of executive order. A lot of that being the tariff threats on fentanyl they put on Mexico, Colombia, Panama, in order to get them to go against the cartel, in order to get them to take back their illegal migrants, put them in prison, and in order to get them to put troops on the border. So I'd argue executive orders actually got that border sealed up.
I'm not a fan of the characterization here when you say like 0 crossings. I feel like you're like it may not be intentional and like the way that you're phrasing it, but I feel like this implies that there's no problem at the border. There's no problem with people trying to come into the country right now. The only thing is that, well, no, it's that 0 releases, right? So all of these people are still coming and then coming into detention. It's just that they're in detention. They're not being released. They're just in detention. So it means like 0 people released from detention. But on top of that, I don't even know how much of that was his executive action, right? Like the giant increase of border encounters under Biden or people who are wanting to come into the country is likely because of the border being shut down for 4 years under Biden and, a chunk of change when Donald Trump was in office. So we were just going to see naturally higher migration patterns. So when you mix that with the fact that they're just detaining you as soon as you come in, and obviously right now the United States is not an amenable place for immigrants to come. So naturally immigrants are just not going to want to come here under Donald Trump. I don't know if I would say that the executive order is the reason that we're seeing, the turnaround at the border that we're seeing right now. I'd say the reason is because it's Donald Trump in office and they don't want to be treated like how he's been treating immigrants. But I don't think that's the executive order. I think that's just Donald Trump's general rhetoric, right? Like the feeding, immigrants to alligators, that kind of thing. And to further show that, like a very, very comparable executive order was signed by Joe Biden as well, saying that you can only, seek asylum at official ports of entry. And that didn't really seem to have the same dissuading effect on immigration that we see Donald Trump's.
It got reversed in courts almost immediately. But I think all the points you said were things I also responded to with my full argument. So, Horace, you can jump in. I'm good.
Oh, I was just going to ask a clarifying question. Can you remind me which branch it is that's responsible for border enforcement?
The legislative and the executive?
Legislative and the executive? I thought that the executive was the one who's in charge of border control.
The legislative passes the laws. The legislative passes the laws that the executive needs to act under.
Right. And you had mentioned earlier that the executive order was specifically for what now? I think you said something about like how the agencies under the executive branch behave, correct?
No.
Oh, okay. Remind me from your opening, please, because maybe I miswrote you down. What is the purpose of the executive order?
The executive order in this case was to restrict asylum seekers.
No, not in this case. I'm saying in general. I'm asking generally.
Oh, in general, yes. It's to order the executive, correct?
Okay, so how the agencies under the executive branch enact and enforce laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So whenever he was making clarifying statements to the legislation that was passed, and as Tyler said, he went back and rescinded it and changed the verbiage of it because he realized that what he had said was incorrect. That's how they're supposed to be used, right?
So no. So the meaningful difference here is that he was not going back and changing the verbiage or like doing prosecutorial discretion. It's saying that this thing that you're explicitly allowed to do through this piece of legislation, you're no longer allowed to do. That wasn't an enforcement discretion question. That was you're allowed to do this through the legislation, but I'm saying right now you're not allowed to do this. That was what that executive order did.
Right. It interpreted the legislation, right?
It did not interpret it. It explicitly violated it. And Donald Trump did not rescind it and then reverberate it or whatever. It just got blocked by the courts.
Sure. Exactly. He didn't choose to pull it back. Again, I do want to be clear because I do not hope that I'm going to have to be defending Donald Trump's usage of executive orders tonight because I fucking hate every single one of them. I think I went through and like prepping. I was like, I don't really like any of these. But we're not talking about whether or not they're good. We're talking about whether they're effective, which to that point, you had talked about the fact that, and I do want to commend both of you guys because you came in with argumentation that I was not anticipating. So the policy is better than the EO. Absolutely correct, Mr. Logix. I appreciate that. And I approve. I agree. However, if we are talking about the efficacy of it, The efficacy of it is to motivate Congress, given the fact that there are two other branches, both of which have the ability to, as you just said, knock back or in any other way invalidate these executive orders. What he has done is he's motivated the legislative branch to get involved and make laws. You had also sort of said something about revoking them. They're going to be revoked if they're ineffective. I think Tyler mentioned that in his opening, that that if the public sees, oh, fuck, this is working like a charm, then either A, they're going to be revoked because they're ineffective when the next administration comes in, or they're going to be revoked because they're effective and they're going to be put into actual legislation, right? Either way, yes, an executive order is inherently a temporary thing, but it is a temporary thing that is used to, excuse me, I'm sorry. It is a temporary thing that is intended to motivate the other two branches of the government, right?
So I want to respond to that real quick, and then I'll take a break so Watts can talk. I don't want to take up all the talk time, but so to that, you say that what Donald Trump is doing with these executive orders is to just motivate Congress to make new laws in order to codify the executive orders. But I mean, I wholeheartedly reject that that's what Donald Trump is trying to do. I feel like a more effective way in order to motivate Congress is to let the problem fester, so the people are angry and they're pressuring the Congress people to actually act on this particular action. And, Donald Trump agrees with that. He repeatedly says that, we didn't need new legislation. We needed a new president. He says this about the Congress over and over and over again. He pretty explicitly does not want to make any action through Congress. He specifically is not putting any border legislation through Congress. He is literally saying that the executive order is the solution. And whether or not that's an effective solution on the border would be the question that we're asking right now.
Yeah. Right. So, and I'll kick it right back to you, but I just want to respond to that. So, Congress is agreeing with the things that he's doing, or at least the majority of Congress, as is the majority of the Supreme Court, which is why this is an effective way to circumvent things like filibustering, et cetera, et cetera. He is doing the things that he thinks need to be done, that his constituency agree needs to be done, and that his supporters in all three branches agree need to be done. So he is effectively circumventing the inactivity of the people who disagree with him in Congress, right? He's saying that he wants these things to happen, and they will happen until somebody stops them from happening, and both of the other branches have a way to stop them from happening, right?
So why do you think that Congress isn't doing anything? Like, what do you think the reason that Congress isn't doing their job currently? Like, what's the reason behind that?
Filibustering primarily. Well, okay. So hold on. Let's parse this out. Because again, I don't want to defend Donald Trump's actions. I disagree with the fact that the majority of, it's a bare majority though, if I'm not mistaken. It's a slim majority in Congress. It is enough that if the legislation goes to the floor, then theoretically it will pass, right? Unfortunately, and if we're being honest, a lot of the legislators don't want to put their pens on paper and agree to it publicly because of how dirty a lot of the shit that he's trying to do is. So in a sense, he's making it so that they don't have to do that unless they're forced to through a 2/3 majority. So he is effectively protecting them from the negative publicity of the negative outcomes or potential negative outcomes of these actions.
I don't. It seems like you're saying that he's signing EOs to motivate them, but I first of all, I haven't seen where that motivation is manifested. Like, since he's been writing them, he's been on a tear with writing them, and I haven't seen anything really change. And then I don't know where you're getting that Congress agrees, because if they agreed, they would just get together and sign the legislation. If Congress agrees,
if they disagreed, they would make a legislation to nullify or invalidate the executive order.
Well, the legislation that exists is already nullifying the executive orders. That's the point, is that a lot of his executive orders are being struck down because of illegal activity or not being given the statutory authority by the courts.
By the Supreme Courts, right? So they're doing their job, sure. Right?
But that's saying,
again, because he's not able to get things done through legislation right now, or effectively or efficiently, he is using these executive orders, and any place that it is not legally allowed, the SCOTUS is stepping in and saying, no, you can't do that.
But what you're saying is that Congress already agrees with him, but that's not the case if the already passed legislation by Congress is disallowing what he's doing, right? That wouldn't show that Congress agrees with him because they're not passing laws to prevent it when they already have the laws passed that prevent it.
Those laws were previous Congresses, correct?
Uh-huh.
The laws, in fact, that you're talking about do not represent the Congress in House now.
But if they wanted Donald Trump to do what he's doing, then they would have revoked these laws.
How how hard is it to revoke a law? Do you know?
It's just by passing another bill.
Is it just another bill? Another slim majority, 51% majority would successfully create a new bill?
I mean, the filibuster is going to change it, but I mean, yeah, it's going to be as easy as passing any other bill. Yeah.
Okay. The filibuster is going to change it. How would it change it?
But wait, am I wrong? I mean, I may have like a slight civic misunderstanding.
I just want to hear you. I absolutely agree with you. I'm just curious if you could expound on that.
I mean, it's going to make it a bigger deal to cross what it goes from a simple majority to 2/3. Is that the?
So in other words, like I said, we would have less activity, right, through Congress because it's more difficult to do, right?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. So what he's doing is he is circumventing that inactivity, right?
Well, couldn't you say
until they enough of them say, hey, wait, no, and then they create new laws to change it, or the SCOTUS says, no, that doesn't actually align, in which case, either way, Congress is motivated to see the holes in or the potential attack vectors in the legislation that exists. So even in that, it would motivate them to review, refine, and improve the existing legislation.
Well, right now it kind of feels like the bar of Congress agreeing with him is non-falsifiable right now, because I could say the same thing. If it's the case that we're using it as evidence that they haven't passed legislation to prevent him from signing these executive orders as evidence that the Congress is on his side, then couldn't we say that the reason that they're not passing these legislations is because of the filibuster as well?
Yes, sure.
So I don't know if that's evidence. That's a problem.
Oh, okay. Do you just real quick? I'm sorry, Tyler. I know, but I got to ask. Do you believe that Congress, the majority of Congress, does not currently support the things and actions that Trump's taking?
I don't know if it's that simple. I think there's a lot of different like schools of thought in Congress. I don't know if if like the majority of them are in line with Donald Trump. And I think it's going to depend on the action, and it's going to depend on what the implications are. So to be
clear, that's my favorite part is they're not a monolith.
Yeah, sure. So the majority may be like Republicans, but the majority are probably not going to be in favor of like going to war with Iran or like all of these different things. Yeah, sure.
And I would agree that the war in Iran should be something that should be eradicated ASAP. But sure. I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your patience.
I was going to take it a different direction, so I'm glad you guys put a cap on it. Logix. I'd like to, or Logix. I thought it was Logix. Okay, Logix.
Yeah.
Ill Logix, my dude.
Okay.
That's what I was saying.
It's Logix. Yeah.
Okay. So you kind of argued to a degree that you were saying Trump acts as the judiciary. He's taking too much power with his executive orders. You were making an ought argument more than anything. So I kind of agree with the several of the points that you said. And the diagnosis to me of Congress advocating its own power off to the presidency is, as I said, like this is an old argument about the 17th Amendment. The problem was that it turned them in from bureaucrats to politicians. And now the senators spend all their time campaigning. They spend all their time with the people. They spend all their time gathering money up. And they don't actually do their job as much. They pushed a lot of that to the presidency. The president's regulatory agencies are regulating, which a lot of people have said for a long time is just stepping in for lawmaking. I would argue that with what you were saying, tied in with a couple of my points, like Trump isn't just acting as the judiciary, as you said. I'd argue he's acting as a legislature. He's emulating some of their powers as well. With tariffs, he's brought in billions and billions of dollars. And though he is paying out a lot of that right now back to companies, that money became a purse for the presidency that Congress didn't have to sign off on. Trump was allocating that money how he'd like. He was giving it to farmers. He was doing all sorts of things with it. Would you not argue that this is the president being able to use his executive orders effectively to essentially bypass Congress and make his own purse?
Effective? No, I think it just sounds like he's doing things. Like, what's the point of making money from tariffs when you have to pay them all back to all these companies that pay them? What's the point of trying to tariff to revitalize with infrastructure, and you have to pay it all back to people that you screw over in the process. I don't like. It just sounds like you're saying like, well, look, money's moving around, but I don't see how that's benefited everybody when a lot of the money that's coming in has to go back out to those people he screwed over in the process.
It's still building himself. It's the ability that he has to build himself a person. With the movie tariffs, metal tariffs, all the other tariffs besides just the IEEPA ones, he's still taking in tens of billions of dollars. That 10% baseline tariff for every nation is the actual #1 moneymaker, if I'm not mistaken, after the ones that just went away. So he's still bringing in billions. He's still got his own purse.
Isn't it kind of nullified when you consider the OBB though? OBBB, whatever.
The old dirty bastard?
I just said BB. B. I don't know how many B's it is. But yeah.
Big beautiful.
I don't know what dirt has to do with this. Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so but like I'm saying, like taking money in, it sounds good on paper, but again, it's literally in the process right now of having to be refunded, which is the legitimate problem of EOs in the first place. Like right now, he's figuring out how to give that money back. And like I said, even if he didn't have to, the one big beautiful bill damn near nullifies all of that.
Real quick,
I just about the ability though. So I'm all good.
I was going to say the tariffs. I absolutely agree with you guys. That was a really bad example. I don't feel like we're saying that all use or all executive orders are effective. However, if you use enough of them, you're going to get again, shotgun blasts work for a reason. You're going to get something in there. He has made effective change in a shocking rate. And just because one or two of them didn't land or got knocked back doesn't, in my eyes, diminish the efficacy of the actual system. Which that was going to be. I would just like for the purposes of the conversation, because I would also like to thank both of you guys, as was discussed in advance. You guys are both being good faith here, and I think this is actually a really productive conversation. Do you both agree that executive orders are effective? Is it Donald Trump's usage specifically that you're against, or are you against executive orders in general?
Go ahead.
That's a question to both of y'all. So
yeah, I think they could be effective, but it seems like right now they're being used to bypass Congress because he doesn't know how to work with Congress. Like, I mean, it could be a little bit of bias. I could say it's kind of because it's Trump, but I think there's a world though where I could go back and look at other past presidents that have did EOs that I'm like, why don't you go to Congress if you really want this to happen? I could probably find those, but in particular, he just seems like he's not good at working with Congress. We've seen this before. Then we've seen an example of somebody reaching across the aisle to get stuff done effectively, and it actually means something. And you got both sides to come together to do something. It seems like he doesn't even want to go that route. And so this instance, I wouldn't say EOs are bad. He's using them bad.
Yeah, I think the question is effective in furtherance of what? So they can be effective if for instance, I think technically the executive orders under Biden to prevent the spreading of COVID, those were effective in the sense that they were stopping the spread of COVID. So they were effective in furtherance of that. But if there's a real problem that is going to be ever present and that needs legislative solutions, I think that there are certain situations where you can pass executive orders almost as band-aids so that people don't feel it as bad while you're pursuing acts of Congress. This is typically how at least Joe Biden was doing the use of executive order. I think when it becomes ineffective, or the using executive orders as an institution becomes ineffective, is when you're using them as a substitution for congressional action. So you're not saying I'm putting this executive order in to stop the bleeding while I get this through Congress. You're saying this is the solution, take it or leave it. Thanks for the 4 years, right? I think that's when executive orders are incredibly ineffective because they're not doing anything to meaningfully change anything on the floor, and half the time they're not legal because the order of the purpose of the executive order is fairly limited in that it's literally just to dictate what the executive does.
Trump's passed about 200 or put through about 250 executive orders, and the vast majority of them have not been slapped down as illegal, though. But again, if we're arguing now the definition of effective, I would argue, in the context of this argument, we're arguing effectiveness for the president to get his agenda passed with Congress being in gridlock. And so you have to ask, why not use the definition of effectiveness as Congress being able to emulate the other branch of government that's gridlocked? And Trump being able to build his own purse and enact policy at a level that, like tariffs, is something the Congress is the only branch that's allowed to put taxes on. The fact that Trump now can effectively tax the U.S. citizen through tariffs is him effectively using his power and bypassing Congress. Building his own purse is a huge argument to show he doesn't need Congress to have money to fund his agenda. That, to me, is showing ultimate effectiveness. Whether or not you like them, whether or not one of the 6 tariffs got slapped down, the other 5 are still in place. This is like showing he is able to do what Congress is classically supposed to do, and it's working, and it's funding his agenda.
When you say it's to further his agenda, who should his agenda be catered to? Like him? Like, who is his agenda supposed to help? Like, is it for him personally? Is it for Republicans? Is it for Americans?
That's a different argument. Some people see it as like you should try to set the future and govern for everybody so your party wins the next election. And then other ones say, well, we're only going to have 8 years. So let's just get everything we can done as much as possible. Yeah, and show the people this is what it looks like under us. And then they're going to come in and reverse it all anyways. Like, why not do it the best we can?
But I think
it's 2 philosophies.
But I think that's literally why it's not effective. It's just things happening. Like again, it should be a desired and intended result, and it shouldn't be like I said in my example. I'm like, you're putting a Band-Aid on what some say is spurting blood. You know, like there was a big thing about the border. You don't want somebody to come in and just reverse it. You don't want that. And I agree with you. The reason we want this 2-party system is so, you know, like there's not too much power in one way, and we want to work together. So, like, you know, that's why I like don't, you know, jive with the far left, because they want this extreme version of something where they don't understand there's a lot of people that don't jive with these extreme policies necessarily. You got to make sure that everybody kind of finds a balance in what they want. And if you're just going to ignore Congress and do what Trump wants, you're not pleasing anybody.
I agree with you that at the end of the day, Congress would be the better way to do it. But Congress is only one step away right now from passing a filibuster breaker, and both sides have a majority of their voters arguing when they're in power that they should. Congress is one step away from being just as feckless as executive orders on everything but amendments. And of course, you can jump in if you want.
Oh no! Well, I was actually just going to say that what you said, I agree with the vast majority of what you were saying, Logix. Insofar as the congressional action and actual legislation, way more effective, way more long term, way harder to get rid of. But you also acknowledge the fact that these executive orders are his method of bypassing the Congress, right? Because he knows that he's not going to be able to get the activity out of Congress that he wants to make happen. So he is bypassing them using these executive orders. And insofar as the motivation, the ones that are being knocked down are motivating SCOTUS. And if something that he does is effective, it shows the people and the House that, look, this is actually a thing. This is effective. Let's fucking codify it. Let's make this a legislation. So it is creating activity. It is creating action with a temporary, perhaps we should have put in the prompt that it is a temporarily effective method, because yeah, you're right. It is absolutely easy to overturn. And that's kind of, to me, the reason that I'm okay with them, because they're only going to last as long as this administration is in house. If this administration doesn't actually deliver on its promises, they're not going to stay in house. And in which case, the next administration, if all else fails, gets to just, with a fucking pen stroke, undo all of it.
I've got a couple things. I've got a list built up. So just for the sake of like sequentially addressing everything, I don't know if I agree with this idea that executive orders are showing Congress that this policy can be effective and it's motivating Congress to codify that into legislation. Because if that was the case, if it's showing that, this is an effective policy, and it is an effective policy and it's a popular policy, then chances are that sort of policy is going to be kept in by the next administration, and it's not going to be illegal because it's been effective and it's been in place. So I feel like that would almost like promote more congressional inaction, in the sense that, this thing was able to be achieved through executive order. The second thing is that I heard a couple times, like, the sheer amount of executive orders being brought up. I don't particularly think this is relevant because you could sign 200 theoretically appropriately used executive orders and they could not really do anything to replace Congress's role. And they could genuinely just be like, oh, well, we're going to, prioritize enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act or whatever. And that's not going to meaningfully offset Congress's role. And you could sign 200 executive orders to do that, but that's not really the point, right? Like, we're not really getting at how many executive orders equals effectiveness. We're looking at, are the executive orders that he's signing to offset congressional inaction doing an effective job at doing so? And then to the third point, we could say that that Donald Trump using the tariff ability is removing the power of the purse, or at least like offsetting the power of the purse from Congress to the executive. And while I don't think that that's a really fair way of putting it, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Because we have like the power of non-delegation, you're not allowed to, delegate core acts like that. So if the Congress says, or if the Constitution says power of the purse like lies in the Congress, and Congress says, okay, well, we think the power of the purse should be in the executive, they're not even allowed to delegate that power. But even if we were to say that they did delegate this power, right? If we're supposing that Congress delegated one of its powers, that still does not meet the burden that executive orders or executive power are an effective way to offset congressional inaction, because Congress's only power is not to control the purse.
Oh, you're right. That is only one example. I got plenty more.
Yeah.
If we're ready, I'll give you another one. I just wanted to make sure we put a cap on this one. Everyone got their points out.
I mean, if Logic says anything else, then
not on that. If he said he got more examples.
All right, let's go on to the next one. So I would argue the president is able to, classically the route to challenge an executive order is somebody puts through a piece of legislation on a local, state, or federal level, then that gets challenged, run up to the courts. The first court says no, then they appeal it. The second court says no, then it goes up to the Supreme Court. That is something generally done through legislation. Another point for Trump emulating the powers of Congress is that he pushed through an EO. This is the second time, I think, in U.S. history, the first being Marbury versus Madison, that an executive order is being used at a high level to potentially and probably change the interpretation of an amendment. That, to me, emulates the power of legislation on another level.
I don't know if we would consider doing potentially because all that's saying really is that I did something potentially illegal and we're going to see how SCOTUS thinks about it, right? Like, I don't know if that's ever been a power conferred to the legislature. So I don't know if that would be meaningfully taking legislative power and moving it to the executive, because necessarily if that executive order gets struck down, then it's not within executive power, or it wasn't within legislative power. So doing something that gets challenged up to the Supreme Court, which is akin to just doing something illegal, right? I don't know if that's necessarily construed to be a legislative power.
You can the limitations. Yeah, the limitations of the executive order are if they are constitutionally allowable or within the purview of the executive branch. Like if something is either A, not within the executive branch, or not allowable under the Constitution, then it's going to get challenged by somebody and SCOTUS is going to knock it down, right?
Sure, yeah, but it seems like Tyler's argument there was that this is taking a power that we generally consider to be the legislatures, in the sense of doing something that may overexert power, getting challenged up to the Supreme Court. I'm rejecting that is a legislative power. I think that's just I don't even know if I would consider getting struck down by the Supreme Court a power per se.
No, generally no. I'm arguing that with an amendment specifically, the only times an amendment have ever made it that far is through legislation. There's almost no examples where we've ever changed the Constitution based off an executive order. Generally, these get handled in the lower courts. For this to go to the Supreme Court and have Trump completely undermine a legal precedent, which he's doing on a few actual levels lately. He's doing it with Humphrey's executor. He's doing it with emoluments. He's challenging things that classically, I'm not saying it's relegated to that. You're arguing more that it has to be that way. I'm just arguing that it's generally that way. 99% of the time this happens, it happens through legislation. That's normally the path to do it. And that's the argument against it. It's so abnormal. It's so crazy that he's doing this. This is an argument that he's a tyrant and a fascist. So I would argue that the effectiveness alone is just showing how effective he can be.
Are we arguing that these are new powers, or like new changes to the Constitution, or new like established precedents?
No, I'm not saying it's new. I'm just showing that he could take his executive orders and essentially challenge the interpretation of an amendment, something that's almost never happened with any other president. I'm just showing how effective he can be with them.
To be clear, if I'm
saying,
not mistaken, executive orders, all of the things that we're talking about, the purpose, power, et cetera, are implied in the Constitution. They're not expressly written out, right?
Yeah,
so again,
sure.
it is ultimately interpretive, and it's ultimately, well, let's see if we can get away with this.
I agree. But so the reason I was asking is that it seemed like, so at first I was I'm just trying to make sure I'm not misunderstanding the argument, because at first I was understanding Tyler's argument to be that it's generally conferred upon legislatures to pass like dubiously constitutional pieces of legislation, and that establishes new precedent through the Supreme Court. And I would say that that's not really a power that the executive is stealing from the legislature, because it's not really a power that's conferred to anybody. And then it seems like upon clarification, he said, well, the executive is actually making changes to the Constitution. And to that, I would say, I don't think even Trump is viewing what he's doing with the 14th Amendment or birthright citizenship as a change to the Constitution. They just argue that this is the way that the Constitution has always been. It was just like against the precedents. So in either case, I don't view this as an expansion of executive power, or like an expansion of power to the executive order, really. It's just like potentially an expansion of executive power, but not through executive order. It would be through the Supreme Court delegating that power to him by not striking down the executive order. If that makes sense. I don't know if that wording made sense.
I get it. It's a little bit of a reach, but I think I'm good with that. I put a pin in that one for now.
So, okay, with that, then I want to go back to what you had said about, because you did actually make a really, really solid point, Mr. Rinn, in regards to if the executive orders turn out to be effective, then it would actually lead to less congressional action, right? But that's a valid point. However, as I said, it's either going to lead to the next Congress or the next administration's Congress enacting a law that will countermand or invalidate, or to validate and codify, or it's going to motivate them to, and I think this is what you guys were just talking about. It is not expressly Congress's responsibility to challenge the legality of an executive order through SCOTUS. However, oftentimes they do. Right. It is oftentimes Congress people who are like, hey, SCOTUS, can you do this shit? So it may not be expressly their responsibility or their power, but it is a power that they use very effectively quite often. And SCOTUS can't just do it on their own, right?
Yeah, there needs to be a plaintiff in the case. Yeah. There needs to be a plaintiff in the case. But like in this situation, I'm just like the way I'm mostly challenging the way that it's being framed, as in like this is something that is traditionally a legislative power, understood to be a legislative power, being moved to the executive. I feel like this is just something that is a necessary extension of SCOTUS power, and I don't think there was ever like an implication that this is a limited thing that only Congress can do, or like this should be framed as like them taking power from the legislature.
Yeah. I don't think any of us think that. So yeah, but I also want to say that, like Logic said, and I make this joke all the time. You're putting a Band-Aid on an amputation, right? Like at the end of the day, we get that this is a half-ass fucking move. This is a lot of these are trying to make the needle move somehow. But the reason that has to happen is because nobody else is making the needle fucking move. The people who are supposed to be making the needle move, Congress, aren't. So again, they're putting the Band-Aid on until we can finish the surgery.
But when does this start? When you're saying Congress isn't moving, we literally had a president that had Congress moving. So like, what do y'all think the reason Congress isn't moving for? Like,
I think the last time Congress has moved was under Clinton.
That's
really.
I mean, okay, if you want to say, I guess like something that
Obama,
wait, as I was going to say, Obama.
Yeah, I think it was Obama.
I would say Obama.
I'd say Biden.
Obama had a pen and a phone. He did foreign policy with almost fully executive order. I'd say Obama.
Obama
did a lot of domestic policy as well.
I was gonna say he got domestic policy change.
DACA, which is he did border policy with the border.
It was meaningful. You know, despite how you feel about it, it was meaningful.
He was effective. Yeah, that's my argument. Is he was very effective with executive order because there was such gridlock in Congress under it.
But also through legislation.
Yeah, I would say like Obama's chief thing that he's known for is the Affordable Care Act, which was a giant bill in Congress that he had to get the Republicans on his side with. He couldn't have, like, without the Affordable Care Act, I don't think Barack Obama goes down nearly as favorably as president. And that was a blockbuster piece of legislation that he was able to lobby for. I don't know if Donald Trump has. And we could even say, like, you know, the 5-10 years down the line, we could be looking at the Inflation Reduction Act, and well, probably not now that all the provisions were removed for the through the beautiful bill, but like the CHIPS Act or like one piece of legislation from Biden, I don't know if I can name you 5 really good pieces of legislation from Biden. I can name you one like really core piece of legislation from Obama that makes them really good, effective presidents. I don't know if I can name that from Donald Trump. I think that's why a lot of people view his first term as pretty ineffective too, because all he really did was tax cuts and then leave.
5 pieces of legislation in your first few months of office is not an effective strategy on an effective and robust amount of policy by any stretch of the imagination. Most of what Obama and the second half of Bush all did, and was almost all through executive action. Obama, again, was the pen and the phone guy that did all border reform, all foreign policy through the executive branch. At the end of the day, Biden did most of his policy through the executive branch as well. He got a couple things passed, and he had to tone them way the fuck down. Build Back Better got cut down to a third of what it was in order to get it passed. Most of his shit, and all that shit never came back up again. You never heard about $15 an hour minimum wage, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
So I'd argue these people all since Clinton. Clinton was the last one that had a bipartisan Congress that was passing shit efficiently. Everything since then has been pretty gridlocked.
I mean, we can argue.
We can just some stats, Sage, because I just a quick Google search. It looks like number of bills signed into law during their the first 336 days. Trump, Obama, Bush 43 all had about the same number, which was about 100. Clinton and Bush 41 had about 200. And we have to go back to like Carter and Nixon to get up to 200. Again, but Kennedy was by and large the farthest. However, if we go, and the reason I bring this up, if we compare that to the list of executive orders by president, the same presidents, right? Because that seems relevant. Joe Biden only had 162 executive orders, which is really impressive. But Donald Trump first term 220, Obama 276. Bush 291, Clinton 364. So like most of those presidents were doing more executive orders than they were legislation.
But to be clear, I think there's a problem whenever we look at just raw numbers like this, because I don't think they tell a lot of the story. So like, for example, I'm moving a little bit outside of my comfort zone, so I could just be completely dead wrong on this, but it's my impression that Congress is not as favorable of doing like small bills anymore. Whenever they pass a bill, they want it to be giant. They want it to be a huge bill. So it wouldn't be shocking to me if the amount of bills that get passed reduces, but the size and the scope of the bills that get passed are dramatically increased. So it could be possible that like 200 relatively ineffectual bills don't even do the same thing as one blockbuster Joe Biden bill, right? So I don't know if that's a really good like measure as to how legislatively effective the president has been in like sheer numbers of bills passed, especially considering like when you look at the bills that Biden passed, it was like, the Inflation Reduction Act was huge. The CARES Act was huge. The CHIPS Act was pretty big, the Infrastructure Act was huge, whereas like, I'm 22, so I only know what I know. But like my guess is that a lot of those previous bills are not going to look the same way that Biden's legislative accomplishments, or even like credit where it's due, Trump's later legislative accomplishments in his first term are going to look like.
They're bigger, actually. This was the time before earmarks got taken away. Earmarks mean every single person got to get a little cut of the bill. So these giant omnibus bills would contain all sorts of shit that was completely irrelevant. They're actually a lot more concise now than they used to be.
And it's always been my biggest contention with the way that legislation takes place in the United States. I know this sounds kind of like a lowbrow take, but it's the legit truth. I think every fucking law passed should be able to be written on the back of a napkin. I think that every single legislation should
disagree.
Yeah, they should be easily implemented. They should be easily understood. Excuse me.
To be clear, though, when I say big, I'm not necessarily referring to like the amount of spending or the amount of item list. I'm talking about like the amount of accomplishment that it would take to pass it, right? So like I'm looking at like, the passage of the ACA as a bigger accomplishment by Obama because of how impossible of a bill that seems to pass. Whereas like
the ACA was a gem, 100%.
Sure.
Because of how much handshakes he had to do. I will absolutely grant you that.
Whereas when I look at like the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it doesn't seem like that shocking to me that a fully read Congress with a fully read executive would pass tax cuts. That doesn't seem that shocking to me, right?
But like, most of these bills, most of this legislation looks like they went around and got everybody's fucking lunch orders in Congress, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, what do you want in there? What do you want in there? What do you want in there? Like, and that's no way to lead.
Sure, but to get back to the initial point, right? So I think the reason we got here is because we're looking at like effectiveness, right? Why Donald Trump's Congress is so bad. Because it seems like it is particularly bad. His first administration and his current administration is not passing as many, like prior to expectation bills as you would see from Biden and Obama. And the only one that he really has gotten passed, the only big one that he has gotten passed was after tons of deliberations. It seems like he's not really going to be able to pass the SAVE Act. And right now, we keep referring back to this idea that Donald Trump is just putting the Band-Aid on the wound until the further action comes. And I don't blame you, because that is typically what the executive order, especially like overreach executive orders like we saw under Biden, is designed to do, is, put a Band-Aid until Congress acts. I think the problem is that Donald Trump does not view this as a Band-Aid until Congress acts. He's repeatedly coming out and saying that this is the act, right? We're not putting a Band-Aid until they act. This is the this is the act. I basically just did surgery on you by putting the Band-Aid on.
And as much as I need to repeat this for at least one more time while we're in this, I am not here to defend Donald fucking Trump, because I agree with you. He is in general, but we also have to remember he comes from the fucking WWE, right? So he says some absolutely ludicrous shit, and he says ludicrous shit all the time. Now, I will admit that oftentimes he's testing the water with that ludicrous shit. He's like, I'm going to go do this stupid thing. To see what people are saying, right? So again, with that, he is drumming up support through these things. He is saying that, well, I mean, yeah, I'm only going to be a dictator for a day. Well, ultimately, if you think about it, that's kind of what executive order usage is. And I also have to say that we have to remember Donald Trump is kind of ultimately an idiot, right? He's kind of a buffoon. We have to defer to his advisors. It is people like Steve Bannon who are whispering in his ear, try this and see what happens. And we're seeing what happens, but it's actually effective because it's getting these things done that his constituency, the people who put him in office, wanted to actually happen. They're fucking happening. They're happening despite Congress, despite the people who disagree with it.
But what's happening besides, I think his biggest W to his base is the border. Like everybody voted for him for the economy, for gas, for eggs, you know what I'm saying, for housing, and literally none of that is happening. And that's why I was when ADE said, I gave you a nickname, when he said that he's getting his agenda done, and that's why I'm kind of like, well, who is this favoring at all? Because his agenda seems like it's literally been helping him and his cronies around him. Like
he's got a 95% approval rating with Republicans. So I'll give you a couple of numbers real quick, just off the top of my head from polling. Right now, if you look at party size, the Republican Party for the first time in 100 years is bigger than the Democratic Party, according to Mark Ruffalo. He did a bunch of studies on this. Next, we go into the Republican Party as a whole. 67% of them identify as MAGA, an all-time high in the Republican Party, and he has a 95% approval rating with the Republican Party. I'd say his base is fairly happy with how he's doing, and that's why he's sitting at a 41% approval rate in aggregate right now on RCP, and that seems to be his floor, that he can't go anywhere underneath, even while fighting a war with Israel.
Isn't his approval rating like
historic low? Man, I hate to debate my partner here, but I was just reading articles about how his approval rate is in the fucking toilet. So,
I also saw that. Yeah, like 30% approval rating, something like that.
Yeah,
something
like one of
that.
the least approved of presidents in American history right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Literally yesterday, Trump's disapproval reaches new high.
Yeah, like for the record, I mean, I know you work a lot, Tyler, so we'll forgive you.
No. What those are headlines. What I said was in aggregate. If you look at the RCP aggregate right now, it's exactly as I said. So if you grab a couple anecdotal polls, yes, he's the lowest in X, Y, or Z poll. I'm looking at polls right now that have him at 48, 46, 45% as well. So it really depends on the poll you pick. What an aggregate does is takes those, jumps them together, and gives you a significantly more accurate number that was only off by 1.8 last election. So
as everybody likes to say, polls are very skewed because of the people who actually answer the phone. Like how many most people, when the phone rings and says, "I'd like to get your thoughts on some political questions," fuck off, click. It's only people like us who are actually going to sit there and take the 15 minutes to answer. I've got a bone to pick.
They got about a 1.8% accuracy rating from the last election. Midterms tend to be a little bit larger, but you got to pick which polls. Some polls are better for the midterms, like New York Times, and some polls are better for the general election, like Atlas. Anyways, the point I want to jump at, it's a little bit of a red herring, but Obamacare was not the signature policy of the Obama administration. Republicans would love it if it was. That was a big reason why they lost 2010. It was in exit polling that Obamacare was unpopular. It didn't become more than 50% popular, I think, until either the end of Obama's term or he left office. And that was around the time that Trump was repealing the unpopular part, the individual mandate, that had significantly lower approval than Obamacare. Obamacare's polling went up when they got rid of the tax that it added on. And I will say, like, he did a lot with executive action. I'd say his number one policy that's still being talked about more than anything is DACA. And DACA was done through complete executive order, and it's probably unconstitutional. We just haven't got it challenged the right way. And then when Trump came and tried to turn it down, he dismantled it the wrong way in his first term, and the court said you weren't allowed to do it that way. Similar, like to what Pam Bondi did when trying to deport people. Lots of mistakes coming out of the administration. Doesn't mean that their executive orders aren't effective when they do them right.
Well, so I'm not okay. So the point of that of bringing up Obamacare wasn't to say that like it was the most popular when he passed it. The point is to say like when we're measuring the effectiveness of presidencies, we're going to be looking at things like the ACA, things like the Infrastructure Act, not things like, securing our southern border, executive number 1484, which, got struck down by the courts a couple weeks later, right? Like that's not what we're going to be looking at.
I was going to step in there and clarify that for you as well, sir.
Sure.
They were not saying that it was popular. They were saying it was effective. And again, we are not disagreeing that congressional action is more effective. That's not what this is, though. We're not saying that EOs are better than legislation. We're saying that it is an effective way to circumvent or to motivate.
It was an appeal to popularity, though, I heard. That's why I made that argument. That's why I said at the beginning, this is a bit of a red herring that I'm going off of here. But it was not his signature policy. It was probably one of the top 5, but I'd say DACA was, and that was an executive order that was extremely effective. Where if you want to argue the effectiveness of Obamacare, it really just put about 3% more people on insurance, and that's about it.
Real quick, Tyler, and for what it's worth, Logix, ADE, Tylerade, that's your fucking name now, bro. So Tylerade, would you do me a favor and for the rest of the class, explain to us what DACA was so I can save a few keystrokes?
Absolutely. So DACA is the Deferred Action Child. Oh, what the fuck is the last two? They brought about 800,000 at first children that were like anchor babies or the children of illegal immigrants and gave them a temporary protective status under Obama. And that never really got canceled. It was a continuing protective status. Most of them are all adults now, and it's been expanded. I think there's up to like 3 million DACA kids now. And they are not technically second-class citizens, essentially.
And you're saying that DACA was a
executive order that was extremely effective. Yes, pen and a phone, as Obama said.
This is true, by the way. Like DACA was like that is one of the policies from the Obama administration. Yeah, sure. I agree that DACA is super popular. It was done by executive order. Now,
and effective.
Yes, and it was incredibly effective. But you also kind of agree with me in the sense that it was probably illegal. DACA probably was not legally given by Barack Obama. So I don't know if we would like refer to, this effective executive order, which probably should have been shot down by the courts, was effective. Well, it's like, I don't know if we should really be counting on that for an effective presidency. And then when we look at an effective presidency, because I think the thing that's kind of going unspoken with this prompt, or at least in my view, is it effective at doing what Donald Trump wants? Right? Like Donald Trump came in giving all of these different like policy prescription that he would need to go through Congress for. And then he comes into office, he basically gets one bill and fucks off, right? He's not even trying to really get the SAVE Act anymore. So like,
right.
I don't know if Donald Trump was running on photo ID, shut the border down, removing, access from like asylum seekers, reducing the amount of legal immigration, like all of this crazy policy thing. And the thing that he's able to do is raise the bar for, people being able to seek asylum and, re-upping the tax cuts that he passed in his first act. I just don't know if I would say that those executive orders are effective in effectuating the policy platform that Donald Trump was running on or what Donald Trump wants to do.
A couple of them absolutely aren't. But I think that the reason that Tyler was bringing up DACA was because apparently it was originally put forth as a bill. but Senate blocked it. And so Obama was able to say, you know what, fuck you, we're doing it anyway, kids. So literally was able to use it to circumvent the inaction or inactivity of Congress, right?
Yeah,
I got you. I know. So again, like, I mean, it's a perfect example of the prompt where now, I guess, again, that was why I asked the question I did earlier. Is it Trump's usages of executive orders or executives in general? And again, good faith, you were not trying to shit on the idea of executive orders. So I just want to hone in and focus on the overall general efficacy of executive orders as a strategy and as of a tool. And then we can get into how many did you say he's done so far in this term, Tyler? Was it 200?
Like 200.
255, which to be clear, he is also on a pace to get up there in the fives or something. So I'm not thrilled about it. But once again, I go back to FDR, who averaged 975 executive orders every term. And he had 4 terms. So again, he was clearly a popular dude doing what the people wanted him to do. So when you have a president who is put into office and he is using these tools to effectuate the change efficiently and effectively, regardless of the stance of Congress, then I feel like we have, even with Donald Trump, even if he's doing it a lot, even if we don't like what he's doing it effectively.
I just don't know if I grant that Donald Trump is doing it effectively. I don't know. Like, I could maybe grant, in the best case scenario, I don't know enough about FDR, so I don't know if I can meaningfully engage with that, but I could maybe grant that FDR was effective.
He took us out of the Great Depression. He was the reason that we have welfare.
Sure, but there was also the new bill, right? Or the New Deal, right? Yeah. So, I mean, like, there was legislation passed through FDR. What I'm saying is, like, I don't know the extent to which the executive orders played in the success of FDR, so I can't really comment on that. I can say that DACA was effective for Obama. I can grant that. I feel like looking at DACA being effective for Obama with the understanding that it was probably illegal, I feel like it opens us up to thinking, like, maybe that's just an outlier. Maybe it's not the case that because, like, when we're looking at Donald Trump's actions, I'm not viewing those as effective. I view DACA as, like, maybe the only example of an executive order actually being good to effectuate policy platform while it probably not even being legally there doing so. I don't know if it's actually a legal invocation of exercising legislation like that. So I don't know if I don't know if I would view DACA as anything outside of an outlier.
Okay, so and I'm not going to do this for too long, but I'm just going to read off the name of several of executive orders from Donald Trump. These are the more recent ones because, again, there's a whole bunch of them. But so establishing the task force to eliminate fraud. Well, he did that. He successfully did that. Preserving, well, that one's, I don't even know what that fucking means. Preserving America's game. I guess that's probably about hunting laws.
Hunting, right.
I think hunting laws. Once again, I'm
assuming. I thought that was the football one. Wasn't that the one that he signed about football saying that, like, you guys can't be doing the, I think it was.
Yes, it is. Fucking. For over a century, Army-Navy game known as the America's game, and it stood as a symbol of excellence. And it's about the Army-Navy football game. Fuck me. Again, I reiterate, not a fan of his usage of the tool, simply how effective these tools are. Because what he did there, it worked. Now, I don't believe that Congress was standing in line ready to nix the Army-Navy game, but whatever. Further continuance of the Federal Emergency Management Agency Review Council. Once again, he effectively was able to extend a committee or council. Addressing DEI discrimination by federal contractors. This is one that, even though I disagree with it, it was implemented immediately, and it has been ever since. So it's very effective at getting rid of things that he and his most obnoxious part of his constituency wanted to get rid of, and it did it.
I can agree with that, but I mean, I feel like it's also a meaningful different prompt. I kind of figured this may be the direction that this convo goes. I would say that it's also a meaningfully different prompt in that, like, is Donald Trump using executive actions to do executive functions effectively? I'd say, well, yeah, maybe, because a lot of the things that you're, like, saying is not really the executive trying to offset congressional inaction. More so, it's just the executive doing what the executive does. So like when I'm looking at Donald Trump's use of executive action to offset congressional inaction, I'm not so much looking at the sheer number of executive orders that he passed or what he was able to do with the executive. It's more so like which executive orders was he trying to offset congressional inaction, and like how well was it at, or how well did it do at doing that?
And I think like at the core of it, like I said, I don't think I've ever gotten a real answer to this as to why can't, like y'all said, Congress has been stalled. Why is Congress stalled? And I truly, I feel like that's
conscientious
the core of it, because I just feel like as president, your part of your job is to bring them together and get legislation passed. And if that's not happening, you're like, well, fuck Congress. I'll just do all these EOs and whatever happens after that, which is why we consider it ineffective, because if you want to get the agenda of who voted for you done at the very least, you would want it to be implemented effectively and long term. And he's like, no, we're not doing that. So
it's the long-term aspect that I wholeheartedly agree with you on. Like I said, you made a comment earlier about that. I immediately acknowledged it. You're not wrong. The long-term efficacy is a different thing from the immediate efficacy. I did mention, kind of like Greniald was saying, that he'd like to maybe tweak the prompt. I would have used temporary in there somewhere, maybe. But as a person who also makes prompts, I know how fucking irritating it is to try to try to tap dance around everybody. Yeah, everybody's going to have an argument. Everybody's going to have a bone to pick. So that said, with this one in particular, to answer your question, the reason that it is the reason that Congress is not able to do things is because there is not an effective majority for many of these positions. We have to remember that that President Trump was elected theoretically by the people. Again, I know my dude, we could have a whole another fucking debate there, but Donald Trump was effectively elected by his constituency, even if that's just big money donors. But he goes in there, not all of the people who have an R next to their name agree with him. So there's a lot of the things where he's not implementing the will of Congress. He is implementing the will of his constituency or his voters. Now, I will agree that does seem like kind of an overreach of what I believe the president should do. But there's a lot of people who believe that the president is supposed to be our number one leader who is guiding the entire course of the nation. And as such, the representatives are supposed to be quibbling over the details. The president is the one out there on the front line with a sword in his hand, right? So he is making these things happen. Congress doesn't all agree, or not enough of them agree to make it happen as effectively or as efficiently as he needs them or wants them to. So he's doing what he's doing to get them to fucking get off their asses and do it. How many times do we see Congress go out of fucking session because they didn't want to have to vote for something? Like that, to me, is the absolute, like every fucking one of them should be fired. Whenever it's like, this is your only job. Why are you going on lunch right now? I'm sorry, Tyler Reed.
That's my point, though. Saying earlier is they've turned into political actors. They have to constantly campaign, pander to the masses, collect money. Before the 17th Amendment, they were just professionals. Right now, if the 17th Amendment had never been passed, Ukraine and Israel would have the full funding and backing of the United States military, like they should absolutely both have. And that is why I want to get rid of the 17th Amendment, so we get some adults in the room. That being said, I think the SAVE Act, actually, you guys hand waved that one up. I think that's your strongest argument. They're actually rebranding it right now. They rebranded it 2 weeks ago to the Save America Act. Last week, Trump called for the first time, actually went the full mile and said, abolish the filibuster so we can pass the SAVE Act. He's been flirting around with the talking filibuster for a couple of weeks. He finally went the last step and said, all right, let's do away with this fucking thing. They're actually working right now to get the SAVE Act through, and that should be your strongest point. Look at this thing that they actually want to do, this thing that they ran on about fixing voting in America and ending the corruption. They absolutely can't do this. They need Congress for it, and that's why they're so desperate to get rid of the filibuster. I think another one would be the USMCA. Trump started a trade war. He started his own purse, but at the end of the day, all those tariffs, half of them the biggest one got slapped down, and the other 5 are going to go away as soon as either the Senate steps up and says there's no emergency or another president comes in. So I feel like those are strong arguments you guys are leaving on the table, which would lead me to the counter argument of the longevity argument that you're making right now. You're making the longevity argument as soon as the next president comes in. Well, the next president's fucking Marco Rubio, and he leaves all these executive orders in place. That longevity issue no longer exists, and they're just as effective.
I threw up in my mouth a little.
Two things. So I reject this slander that we did not bring up the SAVE Act point. I brought up the SAVE Act point in my opening statement. Okay. So I reject that slander saying that we didn't bring up the best point. I did bring up that point, Tyler. You got that point from me. So that's the first one. And the second one is that, like, we could say theoretically it may not be ineffective because what if Donald Trump has a dynasty and after Marco Rubio, it's like Donald Trump Jr. and after Donald Trump Jr., it's, Barron Trump and like all of this. Like theoretically, then we could say Donald Trump's use of executive orders weren't ineffective because he was the only person to get an American dynasty. I feel like we're kind of implying some sort of like rational basis though, right? Like the reason that this is not an effective solution is because even though theoretically there could be a Trump dynasty that comes in and keeps all these executive orders, probably not, right? Like it's probably going to be the case that a Democrat wins, and then it's probably going to be the case that a Democrat gets rid of all these executive orders because that's just typically how American politics works.
So I just think it's funny that you guys don't think Juniper Daisy Vance is going to be our next president. That you would kick the football over to Lil Marco.
Marco's got 9 jobs. JD Vance can't even do 1.
Don't worry, we're all going to get to shit on the administration.
I feel like we're going to throw off the conversation. I'll just wait.
Say again, sir.
What I wanted to say, I feel like it's a side. It's not related, so I'll put that.
Jump in here, man. Get in here.
Yeah, no, I just took the opportunity the whole time.
No, it's not even that I'm not talking. It's just what I want to say just diverts the conversation. I think that's all.
Well, go ahead, divert us.
So
I feel like at this point we picked the meat.
It's more of a. It's not. This isn't even a factual thing. It's just kind of a thought I had. Like, do you guys think that this situation we're in regards to Trump? I think that this winning a plurality of the vote kind of ties into this as far as people wanting to work with him and wanting to execute the will of the people. I think just having, I'm not saying all pluralities means you can't be successful as a president, but just the divisiveness of Trump and MAGA being like a fractured part of the Republican Party. I'm wondering, do you guys think this is also a part of what makes Congress ineffective? Because Trump is like just something we haven't experienced before in politics. So I just think that the position we've put ourselves in, as far as how he got in office again, I think that plays a big role into why Congress can't get anything done because he's not really a Republican, So it's just like, I think that's why it's harder for him to work with anybody. I was just wondering y'all thoughts on that.
1000% yes. So he is notoriously an arrogant, self-serving prick, and he's condescending, and he's kind of aloof, and he's not in general conversation, not proven. The absolute highlight of Donald Trump's intellectual ability was his debate against Hillary Clinton. That was honestly, that was his top note. That was in general. No, I don't think that he is a good leader. I do not think that he is an effective negotiator, even though that's what he likes to try to put himself out there as. I think that, yes, the ineffectiveness or the inaction of Congress is directly tied to his absolute disdain for them and his inability to try to fucking collaborate and or coordinate with his, detractors and people who disagree with him. I think that is irrefutably true. But it's still, and I also want to acknowledge what you said about MAGA being a fracture of a fracture, right? That he is ultimately trying to represent a small margin of a roughly half and half group. So he is only representing 20 to 30% of the constituent or of the country, which does bother me, right? But I do want to go back to the fact that when the people, as Rin said, whenever the next election comes about and we have the next administration, it's most likely going to be blue. And when the blue people get in, for fuck's sake, I hope that they are going to be firing out rapid, nonstop executive orders. And I hope that they are going to be using all of this precedent to drive the changes that those of us who err towards progressive are fucking begging for and have been begging for forever. I also do just want to say that it's easy for us to forget that there were other presidents in history who sort of pushed the line or who were kind of a questionable moral character. And again, Nixon is one of the best examples. So there are other, we think of Trump as being something new. He's really not. He's just the newest version of. He's the TV friendly version of.
Yeah, this isn't so much disagreeing, just kind of like a concurrence almost. Like I feel like part of the like implied by the prompt is like, not only do I think Donald Trump's like use of executive order like not effective in delivering his policy platform, but it's also not the most effective thing that he could be doing, right? Like I think the most effective thing that he could be doing is shutting the fuck up so he can actually get Congress to act. But like, so I think that's the most effective way you combat congressional gridlock. But like the question is like, obviously I know the question isn't what is the most effective. So the question is this even effective? And I don't even know if it crosses that bar of being even effective.
Well, let me answer Logic's question as well real quick. He's not a conservative neocon at all. So you're saying he's not a Republican. He is a Republican because that term is much broader than the conservative neocon movement. Yeah. There's like 6, 7, 8 different factions. There's a book about it called by Matthew Continetti that explains it all. It's a very easy to read, good book, and quick read as well. It'll explain the whole history of the Republican Party. Anywho, he's a nationalist conservative and a unilateralist on foreign policy. So like him or dislike him, the party is kind of building itself around him. When he was first elected in 2016, he had the lowest support by the party and a very large chunk moved away. He grew his base. I think he had 38%, 39% approval rating for the first half of his first year. He grew it up to about 40%. And then every year after that, it just grew and grew and grew, where he ended at fourth year at 43%, came back in at close to 48. Now it's dipped down since then. It's sitting at 41 right now. A lot of his base is pissed at him for mostly the economy, believe it or not.
And Epstein.
No, nobody cares about it. That's like less than 1% of people said they'd vote on Epstein. Nobody cares about Epstein or foreign policy.
His people care. That's
internet people
care.
I'm just
Once
saying,
upon a time, wide-eyed Kash Patel fucking cared.
Yeah, voters don't care about it. What I'm saying is voters don't vote on foreign policy. They don't vote on Epstein. They don't vote on things. They vote on the economy and jobs.
You're right.
Immigration in the last election.
$6 a gallon gas. You're absolutely right. That is what makes my booty hole clinch every
That's
fucking
temporary
day.
to remove the most dangerous, destabilizing force from the world stage. God damn it.
Donald Trump?
Iran.
Iran. Oh, my bad. I'm sorry.
He's built the party up around him. And as I was saying before, the Republican Party, if you look at certain polling, it's bigger than the Democratic Party. If you look at Pew, the way that people lean on top of party affiliation, Republicans have more voters and they're more coalesced around Trump than they've ever been. He turned that party into his party. He definitely turned them more nationalist, definitely bigger spenders. They don't give a shit about conservation as much anymore. There's still some holdouts there, but for the general part, they're a new type of right wing that the country hasn't seen in a couple of decades. So it's interesting as somebody who's just an observer to watch, but I'd argue that the fact that he's not a Republican is kind of, it's more he's not a conservative. And he's
you're right. That's really what I meant. Yeah, I agree.
Well, fuck.
Yeah, I was about to say, ma'am, I don't know what the deadline is, but I feel like we're right at the hour mark, and I feel like we kind of brought the elbow
shaking hands.
If everyone's agreeable, I can go ahead and drop the link in for open panel. And while they're heading backstage, you guys can do our closing statements, respond to a few supers, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, Rinyald, and I just want to say this was the most respectful debate I think I've ever hosted here. And to have 4 very strong voices, I mean, all 4 of you I know are very strong voices, and to have all 4 of you here, and I felt like I could have gone and taken a nap. So,
So we was boring.
No.
I mean, I didn't.
Because she didn't take a nap.
I didn't have to do anything. And I just want to say thank you for being so respectful to each other, and being able to get through a really great discussion. Actually, it's very positive. So on that note, Rinyald, I'll hand it to you and we'll kick off from there.
Yeah, so I feel like I stand by what I said in the opening statement. I think that Donald Trump's, failure to get anything passed through Congress is on his own hands, by extension of him just not giving Democrats any real reason to work with him, in the sense that he's not interested in any bipartisan action. He's constantly attacking the Congress, so I don't know why I would expect the Congress to work with him. It seems like his potential answer is to just do everything through executive order. I think that it's, in best case scenario, most effective case scenario, a misuse of executive power. I think in its worst case scenario for effectiveness, it's just him ordering the executive, as is the bare minimum that the executive would need to do. In either case, I think in furtherance of, Donald Trump passing his policy platform, he's not really doing anything. The executive orders aren't really pushing him over the edge. And the only ones that I could argue maybe would are just getting enjoined by the courts because they're illegal. So,
Thank you, Renaud. I appreciate that. And if you are looking for the link, I did drop it into the live chat if you'd like to join. Logix to you, please.
Yeah, so like I said, I would think that effective means producing a desired result producing a long-term desired result effectively. And I think that if you have a constituency that puts you into office, they want to see things happen that can affect them long-term in a hopefully positive way. And if you go in and you're like, well, I got in for A, but I'm going to do Z, and even in Z, it's not going to be anything you asked for. And then what I am doing, it may not be here next year. I think that's everything but effective. It's just getting there and, I want my room decorated, but you just threw stuff. So I think we should expect more from our president. Like I said, this isn't an indictment on EOs. It's just the way that they're being used currently at this point in time. Like I said, none of us would say that they're just completely useless and should never be used in any way, shape, or form. But this was simply saying that Trump's execution of them in place of Congress is just been ineffective, because Congress can get things done. We've seen it happen before. You just give and take, and that's what we hope for in a president. And if you can't do that, then you're ineffective.
Perfect. Thank you, Logix. Tyler, to you, please.
Okay, so we got three definitions of effective throughout this debate that we kind of disputed. One was the political purposes. This one got disputed the least. It's the messaging that executive orders bring. You have the bully pulpit on your side, plus you get to shape politics in a very quick way to show the public what they'd be voting on. I don't think it really got disputed outside the third definition, so I'm going to just skip to the second one, the longevity of the policy. We argued here for quite a bit. This is the argument that the EOs can be overturned. So I was ready for that argument, preempted it with the fact that the filibuster, both parties right now are trying to get that out the door so they could just jam their policies down our throat every time somebody wins and repeal the other sides. On top of that, executive orders only go out if you lose the next election. So effectively, the longevity has to do with how good your executive orders are and how much the people like them. President Rubio wins in 2028, they stay in place. The third argument was being able to emulate the powers of Congress. This one, I think, I would actually, if I was being a fair judge, I'd say Renaud probably actually won this one with a couple of his points. So just put that out there. But showing that Congress effectively can emulate the power, or the executive can emulate the power of Congress effectively, and this within reason of the separation of powers, obviously. And we argued about the border. I think his counter argument there was probably the weakest one. The other one's the challenging amendment. He kind of complimented my pants down there. He had a couple other good ones, but that'd be the third one. So I'd say we took this 2 for 3, and at the end of the day, we get the W for it. But that's up to the judges or whoever is watching. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Tyler. The chat always wins, by the way. You guys always lose. The chat always wins. Horseradish, to you, please.
So first, I need to thank you, ma'am, for hosting this debate tonight. Once again, this has been an absolutely wonderful experience, and good faith is where it's at. We need to keep changing the tone of the conversation in America to keep moving the needle. And with that said, I have to concede the fact that, as my opponents here said, there would be more effective change and longer lasting effect from collaboration, cooperation, etc., like what you have seen on this debate. However, it is not a zero-sum game. A thing can be effective, even if it is not the most effective, even if it is not infinitely effective. A thing can still be effective at accomplishing its goals. And I think that as I said in my opening, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation if it was not an effective strategy, if it was not doing the things that Donald Trump was trying to get it to do. While some of them have fallen by the wayside, yes, most of them have stuck. Most of those executive orders have actually maintained what his goal was when implementing them. And the last thing that I want to say on that part is that, yes, they are temporary insofar as they exist until they're taken away, overturned, or proven to be invalidated. However, an argument could be made that our actual laws have the same exact constraints. A law can be overturned or pushed back on or taken away by another Congress down the road, or by SCOTUS saying, yeah, you can't do that. So basically, Congress and SCOTUS are able to invalidate a law just as effectively as they are the executive orders. The fact that the executive orders are able to happen as quickly as they do seems to me the best point for their efficacy. And that's why we rely on them to implement emergency responses to new situations. So I think that the efficacy of these executive orders to circumvent the inactivity of Congress is still irrefutable. And I cede.
Thank you, Horseradish. I appreciate that so much. Some love has come in over, I believe this came in on Logic's side, Human Being getting a YouTube membership. Then also, Albert Choice says with the Big 10, what's good, Logix?
Shout out, Albert. Shout out, Albert.
And Sandy sent the big 50. That's my second favorite color to put on the screen. How about yours, Logix?
Boy, like in my world, that's a blessing. But Sandy always show love. Shout out to Sandy, man.
Oh, I love love, especially when it comes in my favorite colors. All right, Big Sarge asked the question: fueling his agenda should not be precedence. Representing the American people should be. It's not about Trump. It's about we, the people. Any thoughts to that, gentlemen?
Well, yeah, exactly what I was saying in my arguments, that he is representative of his constituency, the people who put him into office. I agree with you that he should be trying to represent all of the American people, as many presidents before him have, where they will actually say, look, these are things that everybody kind of needs done. Or he will spend his time trying to persuade people to his side of the fence. That doesn't seem to be, that's not Trump's way, unfortunately. But yes, I would absolutely agree. He should be about representing the people, not him, not the will of the corporations, and definitely not the will of Congress.
That was probably more towards Tyler,
Probably, but he's a white wall right now, so I'm doing my best here. I was debating against him a little bit in the debate, so I feel like I have to steel man him a little bit. So
that's fair. Anything from Logix or Rinyal by chance?
No, I agree.
All right, fair enough. James of the Big Ten says just advancing the goal counter off of 0. Thank you so kindly, James. And remember, Maters, you do need to help complete that goal to continue the conversation tonight. Calvin, I'm waiting for Calvin to jump backstage because Calvin, this is your territory, sir. Trump was certainly focused on tax cuts for the wealthy. Border reform was central to his 2024 campaign, yet no border bill and executive action doesn't count since the next president can reverse them. All right, who wants to go first?
It's Truth Nuke. Totally true.
Yeah, I was about to say I concur.
So once again, I agree that we should have actual bills go into place, and yes, I agree that the next president can reverse them. But as I just said in my closing, they can be reversed. Laws can be reversed as well, and they are a stopgap. They are a Band-Aid. They are an effective way to deal with an issue immediately until longer lasting solutions can be put into place. I would much rather it come as legislation, but we get what we get and we don't throw a fit.
I tell my kids that all the time. All right. Calvin follows up as well to say Trump treats the presidency as a trophy for prestige rather than a vessel for meaningful governance.
Truth.
He's focused on the grandeur of the title, not the gravity of the duties. Shots fired.
Because he's an old narcissist who loves the color gold and himself. That's why he tries to paint himself gold. Huzzah.
True.
Oh man. It's so weird to have like everyone in agree, you know what I mean? Like everyone on screen in agreement, even though they were on the opposite ends of the debate. It's
Real quick as a side note, just because I didn't really get the chance, I don't know how much you know. If I don't, this is my first real experience with you. So the thing that I do, like good faith debates, is the only thing I fuck with. I hate blood sports. I think it's the problem with America today is people trying to shit sling and insult each other across the street. You're never going to fucking change anything that way. So if we're here to change hearts and minds, that's that you don't do it through slurs and insults. The opposite side of that, though, is I firmly believe that you need to be able to effectively argue a position you don't hold. This isn't because of grifting. It's because I need to understand the opposition to know that I don't fucking agree with them. And so I can put forth the best arguments for their case, even though I don't agree with it. And so, again, that's...
I was just going to say...
I agree with them on most of this shit, I promise you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'm like, you clearly a good faith person because you kept stressing. I'm like, I don't mess with Trump, but I will make this argument, which I respect, you know.
Yeah, no, that's very big. And I think one of just to kind of caveat off, or maybe big piggyback off of that, I think one of the bigger issues is people aren't willing to give ground where it's needed. Right. So even though you might actually agree with what they're saying or cede to it, I think people don't want to give the ground just because I'm not going to give you any ground just to
because
add
they
on.
tie their ego to being right.
Right.
And that is so unproductive.
Exactly. I've seen that happen like a lot where people just aren't willing to say, okay, I agree. Right. Or I can give you that. I don't see that happen very often.
Meeting them in the middle is always going to be the way to fucking make change.
I concur. Darth Thoranes couldn't get enough of us and is back for more with the big two executive.
May the fourth be with you.
Oh, I forgot to say that tonight too, actually.
I got you.
I meant to open that up tonight with the intro. Dang it. What a fail.
Sorry, I got the Death Star here behind y'all. So
that works. That works. We'll take that as this is the May 4th, right? Tomorrow we're doing a Cinco de Mayo debate on feminism, so that'll work. Executive action. Executive action. Execute Order 66. Darth Donald. Tom Carpenter says, got nothing to say on the debate. I missed it on a walk, but giving you your favorite color, my second favorite color, but I'll take it. But panel, you're all wrong, even though I didn't hear a word you said. Live with it.
True.
You can't argue with that eyebrow. So
true. I love that picture. And Darth says one more time, are you calling Donald the Christian's golden calf?
Yes. Or the spray tan calf, but whatever, sure. It's gilded at best.
That's fair. All right, gentlemen, are you ready to meet your panel?
I am. Real quick before we do, ma'am. Speaking of favorite colors, I don't know what is and is not allowed here. Is the color green okay on screen, if you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Cheers, everybody. Great debate. Appreciate y'all.
I'm going to go engage in the color yellow real quick while the thing is going.
Remember, if you tap it more than twice, you're playing with it.
It's a giant color wheel this evening, and I love it. I'm all for it. I do want Neil's butt up here. I do want Calvin's butt up here. Other than that, I will bring up those who are. Here we go. All right. I'll put me and Ben downstairs. I've got Rinyald and Logic upstairs. Wait, who am I missing? Wasn't there somebody else backstage? Somebody just disappeared, I guess. Okay. Whatever, we will roll with it. I was just as expected. I was waiting for that one to click in too. I figured that was already on the works.
Ringworm.
Anything Trump, I expect Spin to be here, of course. All right.
Of course.
Let's kick it off. All right, we are in Q&A form, respectful still. I don't want any of my panelists to yell at my other panelists. Ask your question. We'll do our a few minutes back and forth with anyone or any of them. That's fine. We will go one at a time. Ben, you actually get first hit today. Do you want to ask anyone a question or make commentary?
I don't know if I've ever seen a debate so agree so much at the end, and it was a very reasonable agreement. Like, I don't know how you really argue with it. You know, it is what it is. It was a good debate, guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What happened to Horseradish? Did he click a button?
Only partaking in the green. I was guessing.
There he is. Okay, he's back.
Sorry about that. My whole shit just fucking froze, and I apologize. I did not hear what he said when he came in. If it was directed at me, you have to.
He said, "You are absolute trash. How dare you think you're a good debater? Why are you here?"
Mm-hmm. Agree. Slur. He called you a slur too.
Which one?
The good one.
I don't know. It probably had to do with being a pothead. I said it while I was taking a drag.
Cheers.
No, Horseradish. Ben was just complimenting the panel, kind of echoing what I was saying earlier, how he couldn't believe that everybody was able to come to an agreement at the very end, especially, and how respectable this was, so on and so forth. But yeah, Ben, any additional thoughts to add in, or are you good?
I think we could probably I don't disagree. It helps getting around Congress, but Congress is meant to move slow for a reason. We shouldn't just be willy-nilly making laws. So I'm not sure that we shouldn't inspect the executive order situation. I'm not sure how you would place limits on it, though. But I don't know. Yeah,
I've actually done a debate saying that we should get rid of executive orders. So I personally, I don't like them at all, but they fucking do the job.
The limitation process would have to be through the judiciary. The judiciary has limited the power of both the executive and the Congress in the past. So there's certain, if you're going above your constitutional writ, obviously that's not the purpose of EOs. We need somebody that's pretty tough on EOs on the judiciary level.
Hold on. Wouldn't it be possible, as a question, because this was something that wouldn't it be possible to create legislation that outlaws executive orders, or at least puts a better? I guess it would have to be an amendment.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying, clarifying the meaning of Article 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just have to be an amendment.
So
you couldn't get. Yeah, it would run into this is kind of like the whole basis of Trump v. US, where like the Congress can't litigate what the president can do in his official action, and there's just no world where signing an executive order wouldn't be considered an official action.
So basically, we need 2/3 majority, which the blue wave that's probably going to come in 2028 is going to lead to.
The Constitutional Convention. All right, we can get rid of the senator amendment. We can clarify the executive orders. We can, enshrine the deep state.
I want you to think, Rin, about what would happen if the Constitutional Convention happened right now, and how that would affect like people who hold mostly, I'm guessing, our similar beliefs. And why would the other team want to have that happen either? I don't like the idea of doing to them something that we don't want them to do to us. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
I don't think that that's going to happen in the midterms. I think that they're gonna take the House maybe by 5-6 seats, and that's about it.
Oh, you think we're actually going to get elections? I'm true.
True.
That's silly. Now, Cook political report still has the Senate in the Republicans' hands, even while the Iran war and whatever. Actually, I don't even think it's the Iran war. Iran war has the same, if not sometimes higher rating than Trump in polls. I really think it's almost all completely, one, the economy is why he's polling so bad, and two, he lost one of his really good averaging numbers when immigration dipped up before he got shot.
Wait till summer kick in.
I don't think it's going to last. I think that
it's gonna be more real to more people though once summer comes.
Yeah, and when the summer gas prices raise, and they're already fucking like here. It's I just posted a picture the other day at $7.65.
Fuck
a raise from that. I don't know how you fucking everybody's gonna be riding bicycles.
Yeah,
where are you at?
I'm in Northern California.
I should have known.
Yeah, I'm in Washington, and we're there's places I'm driving by at $6. So.
Well, we're going to see that, like what we saw when they just promised a ceasefire and it didn't actually happen for a long time. We saw about 30% of what the extreme, when the entire conflict kicked off, the beginning of that spike, 33% of that went away overnight as soon as they said the ceasefire deal was kicking into effect. I think we see that price plummet as soon as this is out of the way. On top of that, the UAE recently just left OPEC, and they're doing that because OPEC sets quotas on how much barrels of oil they put to the market, and the UAE wants to just say fuck that and release and flood the market with barrels to bring the price down as well. So there's a lot of different moving parts that could make this resolve in a way where the Iran war, if Trump's economy was good, I don't think anyone would give a shit that we're at war with Iran right now.
That's what happened in 2016, right? Was if money's in my pocket and I'm fat, dumb, and happy, I'm generally going to keep my mouth shut. Real quick, Miss Sarah, I don't know what the rules are, but I sent the StreamYard invite to my community as well.
Absolutely.
So there's a potential some raging commies might show up on my behalf.
Oh boy,
all for it. Yeah, most welcome. And once we get through Q&A, I already see I have one boot chat in the chat coming. But once we get through Q&A, then I'll apply the boots, which means anyone on the bottom half can get booted off the panel, and then the people that are coming, I see they're already here backstage. They can get added on as we do that. So yeah, send it out, more the merrier.
Cheers.
All right, Ben, thank you so much. Mr. Effigy, your question, comment, fuck yous, please.
Great fucking picture, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Tyler, it seems like your effectiveness arguments all take place in a vacuum. And it seems to me that we can't argue these kind of things as far as effectiveness unless we're arguing them constrained by the idea of the Constitution being faithfully executed by the executive, right? So when you say something like, well, the executive order can just last longer, but the property of an executive order means that it is at the whim of the executive. He could at any moment rescind it, right? And that's a key difference to me between an executive order and a law. A law requires a shitload of moving parts. It requires moving the mechanisms of people and promises and compromises to get to that point. An executive order is at the whim of one man. So making this kind of longevity argument just through time, to me, like, it just belies the idea of what they are and how solid they are in as far as like being effective over time.
Not an unfair or bad argument. I wouldn't say that it's like it. I'd still argue my same arguments against it, but it's well put. Bravo.
Yeah.
Well, and also to what I was saying earlier about it being faithfully executed in your third part, your third argument is effectiveness. You basically said that, well, it can do the things that legislators can do. But that seems to me that you're celebrating essentially the effectiveness of usurping Article 1 power. If the executive can bypass Article 1, then what's the point of Article 1? The whole thing seems like an authoritarian mantra, right?
There's where I disagree. I didn't take a stance either way. I was just showing you what it is. I did mention the separation of powers and how they can emulate. Emulate was the word that I used. Emulate to a lesser reasonable degree. That's what the courts allow for. That's what the legislation does. They can't actually replicate those powers. What I was arguing is they're effective because they can emulate them to the degree where they're useful. He can build his own purse. He can wage his own trade wars without going to Congress for treaties and things of that nature. And a lot of it is because of the legislation Congress passed to allow them to do that.
Okay. All set, Effigy?
Sure.
All right. Spin to you, please.
I'll pass.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Zers, to you, sir.
I like turtles. Anyway, thank you, Sarah, for having me up. I'm going to try to talk a little bit faster because normally I talk kind of slow, and I have a bit of so I'm going to be that guy tonight. You guys have had a great debate. I mean, you guys have we've talked about, or you guys have talked about congressional, not congressional, Supreme Court rulings on whether or not they're constitutional or not constitutional. You guys have talked about how either it has been effective at making some sort of change in our society in some way and whatnot. And I think, unfortunately, like I said, I'm going to be that guy. I think you guys, I know you guys have got together and you had an idea about what you were debating, and you know, you might be talked back and forth to know that you were on opposing sides of the idea. But I find that the debate prompt is a little strange because we've heard about Trump and we've heard about the executive actions and we've heard about how effective they are and whatnot. But what if we remove the person and the thing, which is, of course, the initial start of the conversation, and we put in an effective solution to? What are we looking for an effective solution to in this prompt? The question and the answer is congressional inaction. I don't think at all any of the executive actions whatsoever has prompted any Congress member in Congress to not act, or to act, I mean, to solve the inaction by starting to pass congressional laws. None of these executive orders are making any of the Congress members actually move. That's what the prompt is. I mean, if you read it out, we're looking for an effective solution to congressional inaction. None of the executive orders have shown to cause action within Congress. And the sad thing is that these executive orders are being placed by a Republican president, correct? Who owns the Congress? Who owns the Senate? Who owns the House? Both Republicans. The only effective maneuver to cease this inaction within Congress is to work with Congress, to talk to Congress. Making memes about the Congress members is not going to help move that needle. It's not going to help get Congress to act.
Any thoughts?
True.
I read it a little differently. I guess it's up to interpretation, but I read the prompt as not the problem of getting Congress moving again. I read it as effectiveness, as to effectuate the policy that he ran on and got elected to put in action. So I kind of we're just disputing the prompt. It just
that prompt would be more of an effective solution to our problems, or an effective solution to what we need to solve. What the answer to is congressional inaction.
So I'll take a stab.
That's what the prompt was, though.
Right. Yeah. It's in response to congressional inaction, and apparently there has been the House passed multiple broad legislative packages to transform 50 of President Trump's executive orders into permanent federal law. So basically, what he used them as marching orders. He explained to his followers, his branch. Sorry, they're on their way to Iran. They fly over my house. So he used them as marching orders for his followers, his Republicans in Congress, and said, these are the things that we need to do. And they've done them. They made actual legislation. Congress also debated the Dignity Act. There was also agency fundings that have gone through Congress. Like, all of these things have been responses to Trump's executive orders. So he has caused activity in Congress because of his executive orders.
Anything back to that, Zers?
Would you? And I would agree that there are. Well, I would at least say one congressional order I know of that ended up getting congressional action, and that was the movement on Iran. But that was the only one that I can think of. And do you think that there would be more benefit of trying to create a bond, a communications, a clear communications
1,000%.
between him and Congress, which he seems to be making a divide with every midnight tweet that he puts out.
100% agree with you.
And I also noticed that some of these congressional orders, especially the ones that get turned down by the Supreme Court, they're like, he wakes up in the middle of the night, he farts out an idea, asks Grok to create a freaking congressional order, writes it up, signs it the next morning, and then says, and then wonders why it ends up getting slammed down by the Supreme Court. And that, I think, actually makes, as we were saying, congressional action. It makes Congress less likely to act upon those because they don't want to get wrapped up in the Supreme Court ruling themselves.
So they haven't followed all of their marching orders, is what you're saying. But nevertheless, they do know his mind. For what it's worth, I do agree with you that Trump's midnight tweets on the shitter are not helpful. They're not effective. They're definitely, and yes, I believe Tyler and I both agreed multiple times in the debate. And I'm not saying that but it sounds like you're implying that we don't agree that the legislation way better, but executive order doing the trick until then. And like I said, we don't have time here to go through, but it is over 50 different executive orders that have been codified in one way or another since. So again, he did the thing. They followed what their instructions, and Congress
I guess my final kickback on that would be, why would we want executive orders to be the method of passing law in the first place, or even kicking the boat? Because often, like I said, there are ideas that he had overnight. We haven't been arguing about them for years, or something that he wanted to solve one day, and he kicked out an executive order for it. How does this not end up creating a lack of need or even concern over what Congress does? Because I can just wake up in the morning as president of the United States, write something out of my ass, and it becomes fact. It becomes reality.
That's a bad thing.
And that is a bad thing. Let's put it in the hands of an opposing party, somebody that you don't want in control, or even a fascist or communist party, somebody that you don't want in control, and they pass executive orders which destroys every executive order under it. And there is that possibility to end every executive order ever made with the stroke of a pen.
So we should get rid of executive orders because they're effective.
Not necessarily. I think that we should use a pattern that has been known throughout history to work, that we have first Congress bitch and moan and complain and try to pass things and not get it passed, and then they end up becoming executive order, which then Congress usually ends up falling along on.
Well, I think it's actually 61 things have actually been codified in the law.
Okay, I knew it was over 50. There was
and that's quite a bit. But I would also argue there's a different way that Congress has reacted to some of Trump's actions. Trump issued a fentanyl emergency on the Canadian border. The Senate came together and said that's bullshit and dispelled the emergency.
Yeah, because fentanyl's not necessarily coming from Canada. It's coming over from China. If anything, I'm in Oregon. Our West Coast is probably right where it's coming through, man.
Congress has been
anyway, this is supposed to be opening, so I guess I'll try to land that plane. Sorry. Go ahead.
Trump has actually been getting some pushback from his own side in Congress. It's not like they're all just one correlated unit. So instead of getting his appointments, Thune and Johnson have been coordinating to keep the House and the Senate closed at the same time, so he couldn't get appointments through as well.
Right. And when he gets pushbacks, what does he do? He goes up and he makes a midnight freaking tweet to bash the freaking guy, and that's not helping. That's not helping to move the congressional needle. That's not making them act. That's actually making them go into inaction. That is causing this block in congressional moose.
But some of what you're talking about, what you regret is with the separation of powers, the power of the president to emulate some of these powers of Congress is extremely diminished. And we have someone like a very originalist court with, like, especially led by Gorsuch. Gorsuch is the one slapping Trump down left and right on whenever he oversteps. He's done it quite a few times, and he was the one that led it on IEPA as well. So separation of powers is still a thing.
Oh yeah, by the way, IEPA, he's beyond the timeline on all of that. He's supposed to back off or have congressional approval, by the way.
We agree.
just to be clear though, like I think the main disagreement here is the disagreement of what effective means, right? So like if their definition of effective is Donald Trump getting his policy aims through and he can do all of that without Congress, well then it doesn't really matter if he's stimulating Congress to act because he can do it all without Congress, right? So if that's their definition of effective, then and he can do all of it through executive action, then that would be effective by their standard because it's getting all of Donald Trump's policy passed.
Ultimately, though, we're looking for a solution to congressional inaction, and that's not solving. I mean, I get it. I get what you're saying, but it's not solving the two problem.
I guess it would just solve the problem that it presents because, congressional inaction in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. The problem would be if Congress isn't. Yeah, the problem would be if Congress isn't like correctly or like correcting bad things happening. But if it's the case that the executive does it, it doesn't really matter all that much if Congress is ineffectual. So it still solved the problem. It's just that Congress is just still ineffectual.
Correct. Correct.
All right. Calvin, to you, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Yeah, great debate. I was multitasking, so I do apologize. I missed some of it. But I did want to follow up on the statement that I had brought up and try to confirm if the panel or the people that are kind of agreeing with or defending Trump. I think it's Mr. Average Debater and Horst.
God, don't tell me I'm defending Trump. I don't like the sound of those words.
Okay, that's why this is weird because usually, there's a degree of when I talk to a lot of people on this panel, there's not that honest and objectivity about his flaws, and it seems to be present today. So this is confusing. This is throwing me off, or whatever the case may be.
Usually, we're breaking new ground for you, my friend.
Usually, you have to beat them, fight them to get them to acknowledge some of his faults. But I wanted to talk about the border bill just quickly. I, for the life of me, cannot understand because this was a corner piece of his 2024 campaign. You look at Fox News, you listen to Donald Trump. It was all about the border and border reform. I can't understand for the life of me why you don't have this bill yet. So are you at least holding Congress at this point in time? I know you said executive orders, was the start, but at this point in time, I can't understand why you don't have that. Do you guys at least hold Congress responsible in that degree for not having that bill just yet?
Well, effectively, Congress never actually fully agreed on anything. During that time, there was the Senate bill that you're talking about where only 3 Republicans signed on to it, and the rest of the Senate Republicans denounced it. And then the House at the same time produced something called H.R. 2, and that was their negotiating chip. The Senate majority refused to even negotiate with the House. There were several things like catch and release would have been codified into law. They wouldn't have gotten the visa program they wanted. There was funding for Palestine in that bill. There was all sorts of little earmarks and earworm, like little silly things that didn't belong in there that a lot of Republicans did not like. And then they refused to negotiate with the House. They said, you just got to ram this through. So the House said it's dead on arrival. That's why that bill died. But Trump proved that you don't need more funding. You can just flex your might as a country. And he used executive orders on the border to pressure Mexico to put troops on the border, to pressure Mexico to guard its southern border. He used it on like a half a dozen different countries in South America to get them to take back their people that were here illegally, a lot of them being violent criminals. So he used his muscle and might as the executive, which if you codify too many things into law at the border, the president loses those powers once they're codified into law. So Republicans won't take that deal unless it's worth it because they have the population support on their handling of immigration.
So that was a fancy way of walking around the issue. What you said, I do agree with, but that was like a year and a half ago. That was before Trump was even elected. We are a year plus a month and a year and 5 months, and they could have done any and everything to that bill to make it exactly what they wanted at this point in time. So there's no excuse because you had the House and you had the Senate and you have a president. So I still don't understand why you have not fixed the bill that was there a year and a half ago, and you have not fixed the bill as of today. And
that's easy then. If you're just talking about practically,
huh?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought you were asking that.
Yeah, but my thing is, you guys wanted us to run around with our hair on fire about this border reform, and we have an election coming up, midterm, and it's a possibility that you may not have control of the House. So I'm confused about it. I'm just really confused.
Well, you need majority approval. You need 60 votes in the Senate to pass a piece of legislation that doesn't fit under your. Hold on, my dog. Yeah, sorry about that. So, yeah,
they didn't like your argument.
I think 4 times a year you can pass legislation if it doesn't change the spending at all, and that's it. And other than that, you need 60 votes for everything. They don't have 60 votes. They don't have any Democrats besides maybe Fetterman that's willing to sign on in the Senate. So that being said, they have to continue to use this as a cudgel in politics to beat it over the Democrats' head. And when you have 13 states that are outright denying federal law on immigration and working against the administration trying to deport people, that's the cudgel they need to keep beating in order to get the public on their side. Once they have enough votes, then they pass the legislation.
Can I also real quick weigh in? You're you peopling me again. I am not a Republican. I just need to be very clear about that. I'm an independent.
I'm independent too.
Yeah, I typically am. I waffle between Green Party and Libertarian, but that's a whole conversation of why. But
You're catching strays tonight, buddy.
Oh, I know I am. I do every night, my friend. But the answer to your question, and I'm sure I'm going to catch some for this, the reason that they haven't been able to get it through is because there are several big business interests who very quickly reminded the representative in their pocket that how negatively it would affect their pocketbook to have these laws happen. And so there turned out to be more practical implications that they didn't think about when they were, stomping on the podium and rabble rousing. So again, the money said, "Nuh-uh, hold on, let's think about this."
I have to go to bed. Direct all your anti-Trump ire at the horseradish.
Tyler, would you like to say any final thoughts to everyone?
Yeah, my channel is really just a formality to come online and have conversations about the stuff I like to listen to and read. So I had a fantastic time. Thanks everybody. Logix, I added you on Discord. You can try jumping by this guy's DMZ if you want some time. It's a good time. And otherwise, average debate enjoyer on YouTube and X and all that fun stuff. And I'll be around if you need me. Take her easy.
Thank you, Tyler. Have a good evening. Say hi to the missus. All right. And I think, let me make sure he wasn't connected. He is connected. So if you are watching over on Tyler's side, head on over to the Raging Tomato. And if you want to continue watching the rest of the evening, we'll kick off over here before we go to the gauntlet. Otherwise, I am going to remove his video now just for precautions. Thank you.
Well,